Hey everybody, thanks for clicking on this video today, I really appreciate it. So, obviously from the title I'm going to be reviewing Bravely Default 2. I finally just finished it, clocking in at around 75 hours, and today I just wanted to come in and talk about my thoughts and opinions on it and share my experience with the game. So before I start talking about it, I want to let everyone know there are going to be some minor spoilers. I won't talk about any of the story plot points other than like the beginning of the game and the setup. I will show some areas kind of around like the mid-range of the game, and then I'll be showing off some classes as well since I'll be talking about that. And for those of you that have maybe never heard of this game before, it's a story-driven fantasy JRPG published by Square Enix, where you control the party of Seth, Gloria, Elvis, and Adele in the world known as Luxendark. And the four of you are on a journey around the world to collect the 4 crystals that were stolen from Gloria's now destroyed kingdom of Musa, all while defeating the ultimate evil in the universe known as the Knights Nexus. Honestly, I feel like they played it pretty safe with the story on this one. If you're anything like me playing these games over the years, you've seen this at least a dozen times told in just different ways over and over again. For what it is, it's fine, it gets the job done. The majority of the story is told through these still scenes where the characters are just standing in front of one another, and it almost feels like you're watching a stage play with some really over-dramatic acting sometimes.
I have brought to you the fabled jewel as requested. Now, prove that thou art as good as thy word. Allow the princess to go free!
But honestly, if you're playing this game, you're more than likely not playing it for the story, you're probably playing it for the combat, which in itself is really good, especially with the boss battles. That's where I had the most fun anyways. And with that, let's go ahead and get into the combat, because that's what you're going to be spending most of your time doing here. So, thankfully, there are no random encounters, which is really nice. The monsters just roam around on the overworld and in the dungeons, and to start combat you simply just need to walk up to them and then the battle begins. In battle you use turn-based combat mechanics, with the little spin being the brave and default system layered on top. What's unique about this game, and actually the whole series, is that you can choose to commit 4 actions per turn with each character, stocking up on your brave points by defaulting, which is just your basic guard here. This turns battles with enemies, and especially boss battles, almost into games of chess, with you having to plan out your strategy and how you're going to take down your foe standing in front of you. And let me just say, this game is difficult, and it will require lots of farming for experience almost constantly throughout. I probably spend a good 70% of my time with this game just grinding and farming for experience and job points to level up my characters and classes. And speaking of, there is a class system in this game, or jobs as they're called, and I believe there's 23 of them in total, with them mainly unlocking as you defeat bosses while you're playing throughout the story. Honestly, the best part of this game, in my opinion, was actually leveling up all those classes, because there were so many of them and they all have like unique abilities that you can unlock. You could like mix and match them and like kind of like create your own builds with your party, and that was like pretty much half the fun for me, because once you got to like the halfway point of the game, that's when the difficulty starts really ramping up, and you would be mixing and matching all of your classes together to figure out like what could be like the best option for you to take down the boss that's in front of you, and so on. So I started this on hard mode, and I got about like halfway through before I finally put it on normal. And that was just basically because like the way difficulty settings work is it increases the enemy's speed but not their stats. So with their speed increase, which is the main stat that you want to focus on in this game, it gives your enemies like more chances to attack in between turns. And it just got to a point where like I would be facing bosses and they would be getting in 20 attacks on me, constantly like braving over and over again, and I would never be able to even pull up my menu, and I would just constantly keep dying. And so that's why like I ended up eventually just lowering the difficulty down to normal, which it was still pretty challenging for even being normal. I was kind of surprised. You also have the option to speed up combat animations, which is a godsend, especially if you're like level grinding. Like usually whenever I play these games and they have a speed up option, I always tend to avoid them just because I like to just play games naturally and not speed through them, especially like with like the older Final Fantasy games that have been like re-released. You know, you have the option to like speed it up 3 times as fast. I would never do that because I would always like to take my time. But with this, especially with like how repetitive grinding could be, because you just have the same abilities matched to an auto attack, and you just be using that same stuff over and over again for hours on end sometimes. So it was nice to speed up those combat animations up to 4 times the normal amount of speed, which like I said before was just an absolute lifesaver. I tried playing this game keeping it at like 2 times the normal speed. I felt like the original speed was actually just like way too slow, and it kind of didn't really match, if that makes any sense. Like it just made the characters look like they were performing their actions in slow mode, so that's why I used 2 times speed up until that halfway point that I talked about. where I decided, okay, this is the time I want to get through the game, and like I pretty much used the 4x speed constantly after that, and like I'm glad I did, because like even with that, like this game still took a long time to get through. And finally, I just want to go ahead and talk about the world and like what I personally think of it. So like the towns were probably my favorite part of this game. Like they all looked like they were hand painted, and some of them looked really beautiful. Especially like later on in the game, I was kind of surprised. But then as far as the dungeons go in the overworld, it's all right. I mean, they're passable and they do the job, but like it's nothing really anything that blew me away. And then you have the character models themselves, and I'm just gonna be honest here, I really don't like the way the characters look. I see that they try to like bring the character style from the first game, from the first two games on the 3DS, and they try to make it more 3D here, but like I don't know. There's just something about it where just they feel like they look out of place with the rest of the world, unfortunately. But some of the enemy designs are actually really cool, and like I thought they were a lot of fun. And then for the bosses themselves, like you're mainly just fighting people. Like there's an occasional monster here and there that you can fight, and especially like some powerful monsters that you can find on the overfield that are kind of a challenge. But overall, like, yeah, I don't really have much more else to say than that. Like it's like I said before, this is all things that like I've seen over and over multiple times again, and so it's just kind of, it is what it is, you know? And for the music, like there's some songs I actually like quite a bit. My favorite one being the one that you're hearing in the background of this video. I like it. It's very orchestrated, and they even like have some like heavy guitar riffs and some of like the boss themes, and like there's a lot of strings I've noticed in the music, and it's pretty good. I will say there is kind of a lack of variety, I feel like. Especially for the dungeons, like you always hear the same 2 or 3 tracks played over and over again throughout the multiple dungeons that you go through in this game, with there only really being like 2 or 3 unique dungeons that actually have their own themes that are different from the rest of the game. But and what else? The town music. The town music I think is pretty good, with my favorite probably being Rheimdall's, the snowy area. It's all somber and it kind of fits really well. And then of course, you know, you have the side quests, which really are nothing more than your average fetch quest. You know, go here, kill this monster, or go find these items, or there's even a couple where you literally are just walking back and forth between 2 people, just reading their dialogue boxes, and then you only ever get like a few coins or maybe an item or 2, but yeah, it's kind of all there is. And then finally there's the B&D minigame, which I played a little bit of, but I'm honestly not the biggest fan of card games. There's some characters that you'll come across in the world where they have the little card icon above their chat bubble, and basically you can challenge them to a duel, and when you challenge them, you're given this board and everyone has 6 cards, and basically each card has their own ability, and it's a game to see who can capture the most squares before everyone uses up their cards. Whenever you win, you get these points. There is a ranking system, and then also with those points, you can use them to actually buy cards from the other person that you were playing against if you are the winner. And so there's a lot of like replayability in that, and I can see where people can get addicted to it. It's just personally, like I said, it's just not for me. Never been into card games, never have, probably never will. That's just how I am. So yeah. So overall, is this game worth a buy? I definitely would say yes. I know this review is kind of sound a little bit lackluster because the way I played it, like I was trying to take my time originally, but like it just got to a point where I just felt like I was always doing the same thing over and over and over again. And with the story being so predictable, I was starting to kind of get bored, and I was wanting to move on to other games. So like, is this something I will go back to and never play again? To be honest, probably not. Is this something to skip? I can't really give an answer on that. I would say no. It depends on the person, honestly. If you like these kind of games and you're comfortable with the grinding and you know what to expect and you're okay with that, then I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun, especially with like the bosses as you play, because the game does get pretty challenging, and that's probably the one hook that like kept me sucked in the entire time. But it definitely got to a point where I was playing the game just to finish it and be done with it and come talk about it, rather than finishing it to enjoy it, you know. So overall, I'm not going to give this a rating, like a number rating. I'm not going to do any kind of numbers, anything like that. That's not what I want to do. I just want to be able to just come in here and just talk about games as I play them and just kind of share my thoughts and experiences on everything I play and just talk about things that I like. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Bravely Default 2. Pretty good game, could use some improvements. Hopefully they knock it out of the park with Bravely Default 3 if they decide to even do that, which that would be cool. I'd definitely buy it and still play through it. But what about you guys? Have you bought the game? Are you playing the game? Do you not want to buy the game? Comment down below. Let's talk about this. Let's have discussions. And yeah, so anyways, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And I guess till next time, take care.